I've just stolen 6 guitar solo hacks from the best guitarists in the world, and I'm going to show you how you can use these to transform your own guitar solos right now. All right, now what do you say I break down what I just did and show you all 6 of those hacks I've been talking about? And make sure you stick around to the very end of the lesson because I'm going to be giving you a very valuable gift that you're going to love. So I mentioned that I stole these 6 guitar solo hacks from 6 of the best guitarists in the world. Those guitarists are Jimmy Page, Eddie Van Halen, David Gilmour, Eric Clapton, Jimi Hendrix, and Slash. So right now I'm going to break down that example that I just played at the beginning of the video demonstrating all 6 of these hacks, and I'll show you how they relate to those specific guitar players. So starting off, we're going to start with the Jimmy Page hack. We start the lick where we slide into the 7th fret of the G string, and then we're going to go right into the hack that I'll explain in just a second. We're going to play on the 5th fret, right, with our first finger, the 5th fret on the B string. And then we're going to pull off from the 8th fret to the 5th fret. So use your pinky for this. And then we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to be pulling off from the 7th fret on the B string to the 5th fret. So it's like this. All right. So this hack that I picked up from Jimmy Page's style is repeating patterns, right? So he'll take a pattern like this, right? And he'll just repeat it. So he doesn't have to just take that idea and just let it be, just, let it happen one time, right? Right? Sometimes you got to repeat for effect, right? And that's essentially what's happening in this lick. And not just that, this repeating pattern occurs over, across the strings. So when we do this the first time, we do it twice, right? Once, twice, right? Then we're going to do the exact same thing, but we're going to shift it up a string. So we're going to be, instead of from the G string to the B string, we're going to be on the B string and the high E string. So we're going to then go to 7 on the B string, and then 5th fret on the high E string, and then we're going to pull off from the 8th fret, then pull off from the 7th fret. All right, and then repeating. So 7th fret on the B string. I'm going to do that twice as well. So we're going... So once we do that twice, starting on the G and B strings, we're actually going to walk it up as we move the pattern up the strings. We're going to go. All right, so from there, we're going the 7th fret on the G string, then 5, 7 on B, and then 5 on high E. All right, and then we just repeat the pattern. All right, and that happens twice as well. So we have, starting from the very top, right, and then once we reach this part, or we're playing the 5th fret on the high E string again, we're going to do this. This is another kind of repeating pattern motif. And when I say repeating patterns, I'm talking about finger patterns, right? So if you think about the pattern that your fingers are following, it's essentially not just repeated, in the position that it's in, but even when it changes positions, right, to a new set of strings, for example, that pattern continues to repeat. So Jimmy Page, was one of those guitar players that he would play the same lick over and over and over again, and it just sounded cool. It never got boring or redundant, So that kind of repetition, especially when it's done with the kind of swagger that he did it in, right? And of course the type of notes that he picked, you could just play that all day long. Right? And of course, it's a very, very familiar kind of quote from a very famous Zeppelin song, right? So when we do that, and we've reached this part, we're going to do we're going to walk down with pull-offs, right? Starting from the 8th fret of the high E string, and we're going to pull off from 8 to 7 to 5. All right, and then we're going to do the same thing on the B string. Pull off from 8, 7 to 5. Same thing on the G string, 8, 7 to 5. All right, so like this. So you only need to pick the string once to kind of, trigger the string and then just do those pull-offs. All right, and then we're going to end that portion of the lick with a whole step bend on the 7th fret of the G string. All right, and then from here, This is where we start to tap into, pun intended, the Eddie Van Halen solo hack, right? Where we're gonna go, right? Now this right here, it sounds difficult, but it's pretty simple when you break it down to its individual parts. It really comes down to just getting the feel of it, right? And it's this sort of rapid fire hammer-on pull-off to an open string, which, funnily enough, this is not, this is something that's actually a blend of a lot of guitar players that do this. Jimmy Page actually does this a lot too. So it's a kind of nice segue into the Eddie Van Halen part, right, where we're doing this. So after we do this whole step bend on the 7th fret of the G string, right, then we're going to start on the 5th fret of the G string. Then we're going to hammer onto the 7th fret, pull back off to the 5th fret, then to open. Like that. Now here's the trick. What you want to try and do is just pick the string once when you do this repeated hammer-on pull-off thing, right? Right? And you're just repeating that essentially 4 times, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. So you do that 4 times. Right? And you want to try to just pick the string once and then just continue to sustain the notes, right, with the fingers on your fretting hand. Now here's the thing, you don't have to play this super fast. This can be something that you work out slowly. That's essentially what's happening when you slow it down. And when you speed it up, it just kind of, the notes kind of blur together. Right? But now here's the thing, you want to work at the pace that you're comfortable with to start off, right? It's more important that you get these techniques under your fingers first at a slow pace, so when you start to build up speed, it's actually going to remain clean and precise, right? Because you don't want to jump the gun and try to play it fast when your hands aren't quite ready. So it's totally okay and encourage, right? I very much encourage this, to start it slow and accurate and then build up speed gradually, okay? So after you do that 4 times, then we're going to go back into a whole step bend on the 7th fret of the same string, the G string. And then here's where the Eddie Van Halen solo hack comes in, where he would do those taps, those high taps, while he's bending a note. Just give that really cool sound. Right? And so what's happening here is when we're bending that 7th fret on the G string, we're holding that bend. And then we're gonna take, I like to take my middle finger for this on my my picking hand, right? And we're gonna tap while that note is bent. It's important to keep that note bent. Then we're gonna tap on the 14th fret, right, of the G string, but make sure that the string is bent. And then we're going to pull off, but with our tapping finger, right? And I like to pull off downwards, because, we have all this extra room now that we've bent that string, so we have a little bit of extra room to just sort of release our tapping finger. Right? And then we're going to do the same thing, but on the 12th fret. Right? And then we're going to release again. And then release the bend, right? Bringing it back down to equilibrium on the 7th fret. Right? Then once we bring it down, we're going to go 5th fret on G, 7th fret on G, and then we're going to slide into the 7th fret on G for effect. Like that. So even though we're playing essentially the 7th fret on the G string twice, it's like this. We're playing it straight and then we're sliding into it. And it gives this really cool effect. So you can play the exact same note, but again, it's that thing that, allows it to not be redundant even though we're repeating the note. Right? So in that particular portion, right, where we do the tapping, we're going to go, starting from the rapid fire hammer-on pull-offs thing, we're going to go, then, and then from here, we're going to go into the David Gilmour part, all right, which probably pretty obvious by now what the David Gilmour hack is, which are big old bends, right? So what we're doing is we're going to slide up with our first finger to the 9th fret of the G string. Then with our second finger, we're going to play the 10th fret of the B string. And then our third finger can reach over to the 12th fret of the B string. And then we shift our whole hand up, just because we'll need that leverage for when we do the bend, right? Shift our hand up 1 fret to the 13th fret. And we start by doing a whole step bend. So remember, we're bending the distance of 2 frets, right? Right, so if we go up 2 frets, 1, 2, right? We're bending to this note. right? But then we do that whole step bend, release it, and then we're gonna bend again, but we're gonna try and reach 2 whole steps. So we're going, right? So we're just in one position here on the 13th fret of the B string, right? But we're spanning across, right? So from 1 whole step to 2 whole steps, we're trying to reach that with the timbre that we get from actually bending the string instead of going, right? Which if we do that, it just kind of sounds plain and uninteresting compared to, right? Now when you're doing a big old bend like this, right? What I like to do is I like to leverage multiple fingers, right? I don't dare do it with just one finger. Because it's hard, it hurts, and I can't even get there, right? So I need to employ more fingers. So this is what I recommend you do. Using your 3rd finger, right, on that 13th fret of the B string, have your 2nd finger right behind it on the 12th fret, and then have your 1st finger not necessarily on a fret, but just kind of like resting on the G string above. And what this helps to do is when we're doing a big bend like that, it kind of helps prevent your fingers from getting caught underneath the strings, which is another thing you don't want, right? So you're essentially bending with the strength of, you could say 2.5 fingers, because we're only really half capacity using this finger here, but that's much better than 1. So when we're doing that bend, right, then it's a lot easier than if we just try to use 1 finger. So I strongly advise against using 1 finger, unless you're, you know, super strong or something, which I'm not when it comes to this stuff. I really need as much help as I can get. So, right? It just makes it just feels more natural that way too. So when you're doing that bend, and here's the thing with the whole intention behind the David Gilmour solo hack is just making big bends like that, like spanning across beyond just half steps and whole steps, like going up 1.5 steps, or even as far as 2 whole steps, or even further than that, as long as you don't break a string, right? But just employing that kind of very vocal, almost like moaning kind of sound, right? It just sounds really like your guitarist crying. It's a beautiful, very expressive hack that you can add to, you know, any type of solo that you do. And hey, if you're enjoying this lesson so far, be sure to hit that like button below. And just between you and I, only 12% of people watching this lesson right now are actually subscribed. So please consider subscribing to let me know that you enjoy these types of lessons, and I'll be sure to be making a whole lot more just like this. Anyway, back to the lesson. So we've gone through the first 3 solo hacks, right, between Jimmy Page, Eddie Van Halen, and David Gilmour. Now we're going to be going into the Eric Clapton hack. So where we left off with that whole step into a 2 whole step bend, right, we've left off on the 13th fret of the B string, right? Then here we're going to get into this cool little run, right? And I'll explain what the Eric Claptonisms are that are happening here, right? So what we do is we're going to start with our 1st finger on the 10th fret of the B string. All right. Then we're going to take our 3rd finger to the 12th fret of the G string. Then we're going to slide into the 11th fret of the G string with our 2nd finger. And you can slide from the 10th fret into the 11th fret like that. Then we're going to play with our 3rd finger the 12th fret of the D string. And then with our 1st finger the 10th fret of the D string. Then we're going to do a whole step bend on the 12th fret of the G string. But then we're going to end it by essentially picking the note that we're bending to on the previous string, but we're going to play the 10th fret on the B string. And here is where the Eric Clapton solo hack really comes through. It's in the way that he vibratos, right? So with this lick, let me just break it down one more time. We're going 10th fret on B, then 12, slide into 11 on G, then 12, 10 on D, and then we're going to whole step bend on the 12th fret on G, and then end it with that 10th fret on the B string there. So this type of vibrato that Clapton does, it's a very special type of vibrato. Now, it's a little bit different from what is commonly referred to as the B.B. King or the butterfly style vibrato, right? Which is something I do a lot, right? Which is more of a radial motion that our hand is taking, and we fan out these other fingers, right? That's why it's called the butterfly vibrato, right? Where we kind of are fanning out those fingers. So it's more of this radial, like we're moving in kind of a semicircle for that vibrato. But with the Clapton style vibrato, what's happening here is he essentially releases all of the fingers that he's, you know, on his fretting hand, except for the finger he's using to actually vibrato. And he's going in more in a direct up and down motion. Now you might be wondering, what's the difference? You know, if I vibrato like this, why should I vibrato like this? Right? They sound the same. And they do. It's not so much a sound thing as much as it is a feel thing and also kind of a sustain thing. So what's happening here is with this up and down motion, what you're actually doing is you're creating this sort of like a gravity momentum sort of situation with the actual neck of your guitar. It's encouraging the guitar to kind of bounce up and down. And what you actually get is this cool little symbiotic relationship, right, between your fretting finger that's vibratoing and your guitar, and letting gravity do a lot of the work for you, right? Because when you're doing the, you know, the regular butterfly vibrato, you know, you're moving in that semicircle kind of motion, you're not actually going to be bouncing the neck up and down directly. But if you do it this way, it just kind of naturally, like, you know, springs up back and forth like that. I've seen Eric Johnson use this vibrato a lot too. And there's a certain sweetness to it, and it does sustain a little bit longer. You know, so like very, very, very subtle kind of thing, but it's something that really, you know, I think really comes through and shines in the way Eric Clapton plays. And of course, Eric being a very expressive guitar player, and it's all in the little subtleties that he's doing. You know, he's not doing anything outrageous, but you know there's feeling behind all those notes, and those little subtleties are those things you want to look out for, and that's what this this hack, you know, demonstrates. And plus, if you're the type of player who, when you vibrato, you tend to vibrato on the fast side, maybe you have like kind of a nervous vibrato, right? It's something you've never really spent a lot of time working on compared to other techniques. This is a great vibrato because it's harder to to like, you know, manically, you know, vibrato compared to with like the butterfly style. It's a lot easier because your hand has more control. With this, you're kind of relinquishing a bit of control in your hand and letting the guitar kind of help you out, right? Meet you in the middle. And it's just a great way to where if you can afford to just release the rest of your fingers and just let a note sustain, it's a great way to do it. So with the slick, when we're going, plus it does kind of look cool. I gotta say, it does. I recently watched Eric Clapton play at the Bridgestone Arena here in Nashville, and you know, when I was sitting, you know, way back, but just watching him on those big screens, watching his hands work, you know, and doing that kind of vibrato was awesome. I loved seeing it, you know. So another little subtlety, a little kind of bonus hack we can throw in here too, it's a very Eric Clapton thing to do, is to lighten up on our pick attack and add a little bit of dynamic to this particular run. So instead of going like, you know, playing it really hard with conviction like the rest of the stuff we played so far, when we get to this point, we can actually soften our attack a little bit, like, and then start to bring it back once we get to that vibrato, right? So it's a very, very subtle kind of thing, right? But that's where a lot of feel comes from. It's in the little things, the subtleties, right? So when you play this lick, you can just like, you know, lighten up on your attack a little bit and then start to pick it back up again when we get to the last two notes of it, right? And it gives you a great effect. So once we get past that part, we're gonna go into the Hendrix hack, right? Which is essentially combining rhythm and lead. You can kind of lump in Hendrix and Stevie Ray Vaughan. You know, I had to pick 6, so of course, Hendrix obviously represented also by Stevie Ray Vaughan in this particular technique, combining rhythm and lead here when we're going, right? So this is actually, we're moving through chords here. So it's like we're actually playing through a progression instead of just playing licks the whole time. So when we get to this part, right, we're gonna slide up to the 11th fret of the A string here with our 3rd finger, right? Then we're going to go, we're gonna do this double stop kind of thing, right? So we start by, we slide up to the 11th fret of the A string. Then we're gonna play, we're gonna bar with our 1st finger, the 9th fret on the D and the G strings. So it's, and we play that twice. Then after we play that twice, we're gonna play the 11th fret on the A string again. Then we're gonna do that double stop again on the 9th fret, but then we're gonna hammer on to the 11th fret just on the D string. Okay? And then we're gonna, you know, go back to playing just the 9th fret on the D and the G strings. So just remember, when you do that hammer on, you're only trying to hammer on the D string and you're trying to leave the 9th fret of the G string ringing. Creates that really nice tension. Right? Then we're gonna essentially do a very similar thing that we just did. We're gonna shift it down 2 frets. So when we did this, we're essentially implying an E chord, right? Even though we've been playing an A pretty much this whole time. So it's like, in the previous lick when we go, we're implying a D chord there. So that's what's pretty cool. We start off just playing an A, right? Then there's little things in there that are kind of making it sound like we're playing over changes without any kind of backing going on, right? So and that's another thing that guys like Clapton and Gilmour and all these guys did, right? It's like even if they played by themselves, they wouldn't just stay on one chord. They would imply all these other chords. So when we're playing this part, we're implying an E chord. Then we're going to imply a D chord. So for this one, we're going to start with our first finger barring the 7th fret on the D and the G strings. But then we're going to hammer on to the 9th fret on the D string. All right, then we're going to play 7 and 7. Then with our pinky, we're going to reach up to the 10th fret here on the A string, just to play that note momentarily. And then we're going to now, with our first finger, we're going to bar the A, D, and G strings with our first finger. And then we're going to hammer on with our 3rd finger to the 9th fret of the A string, right, which is implying a D chord. Oh, sorry. There we go. So when we're doing this, we have just now moved through an E chord and then a D chord, right? So we've been playing over some changes there. And now, finally, we're gonna conclude it with the final hack, the slash hack, right? To going right back to A to conclude this lick. All right, so for this part, we're gonna go back into essentially minor pentatonic, right? So our first finger is gonna play the 5th fret on the G string, and we're gonna do a slight blues bend, all right? A slight blues bend meaning it's like not quite a half step bend. Like we're not bending right up there to that major 3rd. We're going just barely, almost there. And then we're gonna play the 7th, 6th, and 5th frets on the D string, right? Then the same thing on the A string. Right, and then we're going to play the 3rd fret on the A string, right? And hold it a little bit. Also give that a slow blues bend, right? Then we'll play the open A string, and then we're gonna do this thing called a trill, which is a rapid going back and forth between 2 notes. So we're gonna play the open G string, and we're gonna hammer on and pull off to open on the 2nd fret here. Like that. So let me talk about the slash hack. So what is actually happening here, it's not in my fretting hand, it's in my picking hand. Now, it kind of sounds like I'm doing pinch harmonics, right? Sort of, almost, right? They're not full-blown pinch harmonics, like, which you absolutely could do if you wanted to. But here's the hack, and this is another kind of subtlety here. It's not so much the trying to make a pinch harmonic, but it's this kind of aggressive downward attack with the pick. When I'm picking each note in this part, it's all downstrokes. Like I'm not alternate picking, because you can kind of lose that effect. But when you have this sort of downward attack, it's like the notes kind of pop. So it's like a almost pinch harmonic, but not quite, right? Right? And like I said, you absolutely can take any of the stuff that you learn, by the way, and add your own spin on it. If you want to make these full-blown pinch harmonics, you absolutely can. Right? But the whole point is with that downward attack, it just gives the notes more pop, and it just makes them sound mean, man. Like that's what I love about Slash, is that his playing style is just very like, it has attitude, And he can just play, a bunch of guitar players can play the same amount of notes, but when Slash plays them, they have this certain attitude to them, right? And it just sounds mean and awesome, right? So that's more or less where it's kind of coming from, is this downward attack that is, like I said, an almost pinch harmonic, but it's really just making the notes pop. And it's like you're also not sustaining the notes, so they're kind of staccato. They're going like pop, 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 right? So you're not like going. It's like, so you can hear like the separation between the notes. So there's a little bit of muting going on, right? So you do that attack and then momentarily mute the strings with your picking hand. So you can kind of see between each pick, I'm picking and then I'm just going back to muting. So I'm kind of like bouncing my palm back and forth on the string. All right, and again, it just gives it more attack. So if I were to just play it kind of straight, like, sounds okay, but when I play it like this, oh, right? It just, you know, it's those little things, man, I'm telling you, they make a huge difference. And then, of course, that little trill, which is not just a slash thing, that's very much, you know, I mean, all the greats did these kind of things, you know, but it's something about trilling on the G string, you know, from the open G to the 2nd fret. It has this, there's like a snarl to it, right? Especially if you're playing a Les Paul style guitar. So we're just doing this, and you can trill it as long as you want, you know. I will say with trilling, especially if you're new to it, start slow. The important thing is that you're getting that technique under your fingers, right? So if you got to do it slow, you got to make sure that you're hearing every single note, because you're really only picking the string once. And then all the rest of the sound is coming from your fretting hand, sustaining the note. Another trick that you can do actually is you can mute the surrounding strings. So that since we're using the G string, you can mute the D and the B strings by resting your pick, for example, on the D string, right? So it's just muting it. And then you can just have your 3rd finger here on just resting on the B string. So when you're doing that trill, kind of exaggerating here, but you can see how it's like there's no excess noise because I'm muting these 2 strings. All right, now when I end the trill, I like to end it on that open G, because it also, even though it's a single note, it kind of implies another chord, which would be a G, right? Or like a flat 7 kind of thing. So, right, and then you can just end it back on the 1, which is an A chord, right? Or A power chord, whatever you want to do, right? I also threw in like an A9 chord, you know. It doesn't matter, like any kind of substitute for an A chord or just a simple A power chord to conclude it if you want to would work great. Now I'm going to do a quick run through of the solo we just learned using these 6 hacks. I'm going to play it slow and then I'll play a little bit faster. And if at any point you need to rewatch or relearn any of the parts that we had just broken down with this solo, be sure to go back in the video and find the part that you're having trouble with and rewatch it as many times as it takes till you get it down. All right, now here's the solo played slow. Okay, now here it is played a little bit faster. And now you know these 6 epic guitar solo hacks used by the legends themselves. All that's left for you now is to start using them in your own solos. In today's lesson, we've gone through these hacks in the key of A, but imagine being able to employ these same hacks in every single musical key imaginable. Remember that gift I owe you? Now that you're at the end of the lesson, it's going to show you how to do just that. It's a free guitar cheat sheet that's going to show you how to instantly solo in any musical key. This free cheat sheet will transform the way you play guitar solos forever, and you don't have to know a lick of music theory. It's helped thousands of other guitar players just like you learn how to solo up and down the fretboard within minutes. If playing guitar solos in any key imaginable in just minutes from now interests you, be sure to click here to claim your copy right now. I want to thank you for hanging out with me today. I hope you've enjoyed this lesson as much as I've enjoyed bringing it to you. I'm Eddie with Guitar Mastery Method, and I look forward to seeing you in the next lesson.